My name is Sabnas Nagid from the University of Oslo, and I will have the pleasure of introducing quickly the works that you'll be seeing. This is a project called Being Visitors, Becoming Producers, an Erasmus-funded intensive program where 4 countries, 4 institutions have been involved, from the University of Hildesheim in Germany, Reinhardt's Academy in the Netherlands, the University of Art and Design in Hungary, and the Department of Cultural Studies and Oriental Languages in Oslo. And we have been received very generously by the Wereldscultuurmuseum in Gothenburg, that has really given us the opportunity to work with participation as our main theme. I will not talk too much. I will just say there are 4 groups that are going to present their solutions to some of the requests from the Wereldscultuur Museum. And we hope that the museum will think they're interesting. Each group, we have thought of having each group presenting their solutions. This would take about 15-20 minutes, and then at the end, after all the groups have presented, then there is room for comments or questions to the different participants. The 4 groups are glocalization, objects, together, and time, which are also the themes that the museum has given us. So we'll begin with glocalization, please.
Okay, so I'm the one starting up, and I'm responsible for kind of introducing our group, the glocalization group. But maybe I should start by saying that our group also had a somewhat different approach to this than what the rest of the members of the workshop have had. And well, the reason for this is probably because we are the glocalization group. Because since we came here, we've been talking about the concept glocalization, globalization, and what the Wereldscultuur Museum uses themselves, namely the contemporary global issues. And these terms, I mean, they're very up there all the time, so it's kind of hard to take it down to something very practical. But we heard though that we should get practical, but we've also heard that we don't have to come up with a fix. So this is kind of what's been going on. This is our process rather than a fix or a result. And we have far from all the time agreed on, is this what you want? Yeah? We are far from agreed on everything all the time, but that's also what made it so fun to discuss these things. But for these reasons though, please consider this presentation a compilation of our thoughts, more a reflection than any kind of fixed result. And after I'm done talking a little bit about the critical reflection of the theory, we will try though to get a little bit more practical by naming 3 topics which we kind of filtered out from the discussions we had, so to say. But first, to speak of glocalization is to resolve nothing, and that's a quote we found by sociologist David Connell, from the University of Sydney, Australia. She's a sociologist but also a gender theorist. In this article, and the article, by the way, is called The Northern Theory of Globalization. She starts by giving this rather general expose of the history of globalization, the developments and the different interpretations, and all the terms circling it. She also presents many of the well-known texts and authors which are trying to theorize globalization, and she examines their methods for constructing the concept of global society, their autonomies and their language and performative effectiveness. She starts where many others also start, about talking about globalization as a concept deriving from business, journalism and economy, and then becoming picked up by sociologists of the Anglophone world. And what she says also is that many theories and many concepts about globalization, they were very ambitious, and they tried to follow these new paths and to form a new society. And now we're talking about the turn of the century, 21st century, so as far as we understood, it's also in this tradition which the World Cultural Museum was kind of founded. Problem though, being that, as Connell puts it herself, most of the theories are from the Anglophone world, and for this reason it's Northern theory and not global theory. And she says it's a striking fact that this body of writing, while insisting on the global scope of social process and the irreversible interplay of cultures, almost never cites non-metropolitan thinkers and almost never builds on social theory formulated outside the Anglophone metropole. This fact, that global theory is more or less Northern theory, can make the relation or the tension between global and local a contradiction of the actual body of theory. And in this context, the quote of that to speak of globalization is to resolve nothing, that's where it derives from. Her argument continues with that it is to assert both the terms as a static polarity at once. The local-global opposition has not been conceptually resolved. In various forms, local-global, national-global, continues to structure both debate and research, of course, but it also makes it kind of dialectic. And therefore, the relationship between the local and global is, of course, arbitrary, and the danger is that not the global, but the local somewhat loses its meaning. And we pose it as a question. Where is the question? What meaning does locality hold other than being non-global? So out of this initial reflection on the tension between them two, many questions, of course, arises, and one is, how do we rid thinking of globalization and being in it from this performative structure which is embedded in theory as well as in everything we do? And of course it might be possible to turn some of the focus to the global south, and Connell in her article actually does that. She mentions, or even name drops, a lot of theories and authors that are not from Europe, they're not male and they're not Anglophone or anything. And Joan Acker, another critic of global theory, suggests a gendering of the discourse of globalization, which might also expose the discontinuities between the realities of people's lives and the mainstream or Anglophone scholarly work about the global process. And this also, combined with integral attention to race and ethnic process, could mean gendering can produce a better understanding of contemporary global issues. But today, as us reflecting here, and the museum when they're producing, are still kind of stuck in this northern discourse. And the problem is not really that we can't Google nice and shiny theories of performativity and the authors who are not white and male and from Europe and so on. The problem is, of course, how do we apply it? How do we practice? How is gendering of the discourse of globalization transformed into a set exhibition of 0 to 12-year-olds? And how do we make this sustainable? So that the approaches can also be transformed from theory to something that is accessible for everyone. I don't know how, and I don't think any of us knows how, because I don't think we would be here. But at least we're discussing it, and at least our group has, during these 2 weeks, gotten maybe a little bit closer of grasping the very complex problem the World Culture Museum is facing in this, I don't know, dialectic tension or whatever. But for these reasons also, we have to get practical, if not for anything else, to see the limitations of practice, but also to see the benefits it might offer. Yeah, so let us go a little bit practical. And maybe my... Okay, makes sense.
Okay, let's go indeed a little bit practical. According to one of the theorists discussing globalization, Manuel Castells, the future role of a museum could be serving as a connector between the global and local dimensions of identity, space and local society. And we see the Museum of World Culture fit to take up this role. However, in taking up this role also lies a challenge. To create sustainable links between its largely non-local collection and its local audience, the museum might have to become more locally embedded than it is at the moment. Of course, the museum has already successfully created networks. It is involved in several worldwide networks and it has been active within local communities. However, in order to broaden its local knowledge base, we could envision the museum to additionally invest in a local expert network, which would complement its current networks and would create a sustainable base for its function as the new expert or journalist and a facilitator for instance, participatory projects. How do we envision this network? We would like to refer to an article of Mr. Houtgraaf, in which he sketches the transformation from a museum with a network to a network with a museum. And we could envision the museum to become a participant in a reciprocal local network with other local institutes and organizations. In this kind of network, which can be created both physically as well as virtually, it is key that all stakeholders play an equal role. There is no hierarchy involved. The museum will not be positioned at the center of the network, but is one of the players in the web. And essential to the network is the sharing of knowledge and information. An example we would like to refer to is a project that was initiated by the Port Authority of the Rotterdam Harbour in the Netherlands. In order to reconnect the public with the Rotterdam Harbour area, which is currently being redeveloped for cultural and educational purposes, this organization asked Rotterdam-based museum Boijmans van Beuningen to cooperate in the project. Over a period of 5 years, a number of art projects with international artists were organized in the harbour area, and for instance Rotterdam schools took part in participatory activities connected to this project. If we would envision a network for the Museum of World Culture, we would consider institutes like the City Museum, the University, the Göteborg Harbour maybe, the library, the archive, the opera, but also organizations next door, like the Universeum and last but not least, Liseberg as optional partners. At a presentation we went to Monday, and where we met a representative of the Liseberg management, we found out that they definitely are interested in a more intensive contact with their closest neighbor. Thank you. My colleague Maria will now continue discussing the participation.
Our group also wanted to work a little bit with participation, and we would like to discuss with you the fact that participation and participatory project is two different things. And of course, we would like to use an example of a project that was made by City Museum of Amsterdam. And of course we realize that City Museum is not an ethnographical museum, but still, since we are talking about building network, we of course should share our experience, and we think that if we try to reflect on mistakes probably or some difficult that they face, you can prepare yourself for this difficulty as well. Before starting to work with participatory projects, of course you should realize that you need to build equal relationship with your participators and with your partners. And it means that you are not only ready to listen to them, but also offer your own skills and experience. We need to take risks, we need to research local needs, and we also want to keep in mind that it should be sustainable. What City Museum made, they wanted to make project with private shops in different parts of Amsterdam, and they wanted to bring more local people to the project. For that they rented different spaces in different parts of Amsterdam, and they made it like little departments of museum, and they expected people to come and share their stories, objects, and they wanted through this process cause the interest to the whole participatory project. But it wasn't that successful till the moment when they realized that they can use key persons. These key persons were within the shop system, they were not museum experts. And these 2 or 3 persons were paid by museum, and in Swedish context it of course makes sense to mention, because as we heard, you are not able to use volunteers for this work, but these people actually worked for museum. And we would like to maintain that they were not experts, but museum trusted them, because museum realized that they know better this community. And on this period of time, this project really worked, and it was really participatory. But what we see now is that there are no connections between community and museum. So after the project, we don't see really sustainability. And we are not saying that it means that project didn't work out, but we would like to ask you, was it sustainable? That's our point. Thank you. And now Meryl.
So we could not help noticing that the Bas Cultuurmuseum suffered, maybe still is suffering, something that kind of might be described as a little identity crisis. Having started as a museum that was very spot-on innovative, it kind of lost its track along the way, starting with issues of globalization, localization in contemporary society. You can describe it as first being in what Italo Calvino calls the center of an inferno, or the hurricane, where there is a calm, and the museum was able to choose its own direction, and now being caught up in the outer of the hurricane, and going with the flow. On top of that, the museum is also dependent on what the authority has stated it to do, it being an educational facility, and having a responsibility for this. In this current day and age, and under the constant strains of the demands, this clashes with the wants and the needs of the public who seek an outer of the hurricane supply and demand. Now, based on different learning theories, such as Holt, McCarthy, and Dunn and Dunn, we would like to suggest an activity for the upcoming exhibition that might help the museum to fulfill the demands and needs of the current day public. That is to combine the task of spreading knowledge and contemporary global issues to a younger audience. On one hand, the museum should function as some sort of role model for younger generations, obtaining knowledge on contemporary global topics to help them understand and deal with difficult life issues. On the other hand, the museum should also meet different ways of learning, known as learning styles, and deal with both physical and learning disabilities that covers this. In this way, the museum contributes to the needs of a younger audience. So, our suggestion is that it can be profitable for the museum when making new projects to integrate these different learning styles in the way they address the content as well as the hardware. It is up to the museum to ensure that all have access to the educational opportunities that they offer. So without a proactive approach and having this in mind from the very beginning of planning an exhibition, it would only be the most engaged and best resource that would access museum learning. Another more practical suggestion is the introduction of a do-book, a small booklet in which you can find small artifacts, assignments, activities, and questions about the exhibition or an iconic object in the exhibition. For example, the two-way drum that is being used for team togetherness. By using this do-book, you can create a more participative and object-centered experience, thus hopefully increasing visitor understanding of the object or the subject. For instance, by doing activities, listening to stories, or answering different questions about the object that you can find in this do-book. The key element when making something like this is to start with something the audience is already familiar with. Start with what they know. From that point, you can continue with integrating contemporary global issues to create awareness. So, to come back to the two-way drum, which is about being together and communicating, you can increase awareness about the most, for example, increase awareness about the most common item in modern communication, the mobile phone. So from this, you can explore all sorts of subjects, such as social media, human rights, democracy, gender, etc., which can become more accessible by starting with something the audience can relate to. So, this was our presentation. Thank you for listening and thanks for giving us all.